sons of Peleth became insolent and rose up against Moses. With them were 250 Israelite men, well-known community leaders who had been appointed members of the council. They came as a group to oppose Moses and Aaron and said to them, and before I read what was said to them, I want you to understand truly what's going on. Korah and his group clearly were people that by worldly standards were successful, were considered leaders. It speaks of them being community leaders. You see it in the text. It speaks of them doing some things in the community, in the area in which they live, that might have shown leadership abilities. They were successful in that area. When you talk about flesh, these guys had it. And they were chief, and they were over a council, and they were in control of some things, but we're still talking about worldliness. And they rose up against Moses and Aaron. I can't tell you exactly what was in their minds and why they would do such a thing. Especially, flip back really quick to Numbers 14. You remember in Numbers 14, it was just 2 chapters over, and we're not speaking of a decade in years, but in Numbers 14, the people had such a problem with the land and the giants and the things like that, that they actually wanted to get rid of Moses and Aaron and Joshua and Caleb. And they wanted to go back to Egypt, which was known as sin. Egypt was clearly sin for Israel. It was not a land flowing with milk and honey. It was not a place where God had prepared for his people. It was sinful. Yet even by Numbers 14, after more than 2 years of going around in the wilderness, there were people that arose against Moses and Aaron and Joshua and Caleb and wanted to go back to Egypt, wanted to return to the way that they were. They were enslaved in Egypt. Why would they want to go back there? It is interesting when we talk about the fall of man and we talk about the state, as Peter said, when God has saved us to keep us saved. And then we, like the dog, want to return. We, like that pig, want to go back. Here's the condition that existed in Numbers 14. And there were a lot of carcasses that fell in the wilderness as a result of Numbers 14. Have time, read that later. But on the heels of that, we have Numbers 16. As if Korah did not know what happened in the wilderness. Here he comes again with men in great number, community leaders, 250 Israelite men, well-known community leaders. They came to oppose Moses and Aaron. Listen to what they said. Verse 3 says, they came as a group to oppose Moses and Aaron, and they said to them, you have gone too far. The whole community is holy, every one of them, and the Lord is with them. Why then do you set yourself above the Lord's assembly? They challenged Moses' leadership. And when I read those words, I look back and I go, you know, I'm looking at Moses' track record. I'm really not, I don't know Moses personally. I only know Moses from what the scriptures tell me. And I can only go back and look at what Moses did. Wasn't this the guy that led them out of Egypt? Wasn't this the guy that rescued them from 430 years of oppression? Wasn't this the guy that sat with the Lord at that burning bush and was commissioned to do this work? As we said before, clearly, Moses didn't share the burning bush conversation with anybody. Who else knew that? He didn't say, hey, guess what happened? There was a burning bush and wow, God was there. He didn't talk about that. But he went to Egypt with a stick. He led God's people out and defeated all those idol gods by the hand of God. Clearly demonstrating that he is God's man, and the people would have known, not because they were present at the burning bush story, not because they could plop in a DVD and see what happened at the burning bush. They had to go by the work of Moses' hand. They had to watch what he did. They had to see how he lived. They had to see his relationship relationship with the Lord clearly demonstrated before them. That's all they could go on. They didn't have to go on Moses' own personal testimony. Moses didn't have to say, I am God's man. He acted like it. And because he acted like it, because he did things that were in accordance to God's will, Israel prospered. They prospered. And so Moses and Aaron at this point are now being challenged. Years after they have dwelled with Israel. Saving them, showing them God's way, introducing Moses was the lawgiver. Pointing them in a direction they had never gone before. Moses did that. And here comes Korah, good community leader. Not a spiritual person, obviously. And he is trying to challenge Moses. Moses says in verse 8. Oh, I'm sorry, verse 4. When Moses heard this, he fell face down. Then he said to Korah and all his followers, in the morning the Lord will show who belongs to him and who is holy. And he will have that person come near him. The man he chooses, he will cause to come near him. You, Korah, and all your followers are to do this. Take censers, and tomorrow put fire and incense in them before the Lord. The man the Lord chooses will be the one who is holy. You Levites have gone too far. Moses also said to Korah, now listen, you Levites. Isn't it enough for you that the God of Israel has separated you from the rest of the Israelite community and brought you near to himself to do the work of the Lord's tabernacle and to stand before the community and minister to them? He asked, isn't it enough of what God has already given you? You guys are Levites. Is that not enough? Verse 10 says, he has brought you and all your fellow Levites near himself. But now you're trying to get the priesthood too? It is against the Lord that you and all of your followers have banded together. And who is Aaron that you should grumble against him? Then Moses summoned Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Elah. But they said, we will not come. Isn't it enough that you have brought us up out of a land flowing with milk and honey to kill us in the desert? Listen to Dathan and Abiram. They said to Moses, isn't it enough already? Haven't you done enough? You took us out of a land flowing with milk and honey to have us die in the wilderness, die in the desert. Do you know they're talking about Egypt? He called Egypt a place flowing with milk and honey. Not for the Israelites, it wasn't. If you were Egyptian, sure it was. It was a great place to be. But for Israel, that was the worst place to be. Egypt was sin. And here Moses is trying to talk to this group and compel them to glorify God in what has happened. And they say, oh Moses, haven't you done enough? You talk about us, but haven't you done enough? You took us from a place of milk and honey. You took us out of our comfort zone to bring us to this wilderness place, and we don't like it. But those be words spoken of men of God. He then says, and now you also want to lord it over us. Verse 14, moreover, you haven't brought us into a land flowing with milk and honey, or given us an inheritance of the fields and the vineyards. Will you gorge out the eyes of these men? No, we will not come. Verse 15, then Moses became very angry and said to the Lord, do not accept this offering. I have not taken so much as a donkey from them, nor have I wronged any of them. Moses obviously is upset. And Moses is upset because Moses really viewed what he did was as a ministry. That he was honoring and glorifying God in the things that he did. And he was doing it God's way, and they saw prospering because of it. And from my experience, I bet Moses thought he was teaching them better. I think that Moses believed that they should have known enough not to do something like this. I think that's what Moses thought. Speaking as a preacher myself, I'm going, Moses is probably even more upset because he's thinking he's been with them long enough for them to know better. That's what he's thinking.